Hello everyone! Welcome back and huge thanks for all the support on our last video, it really means a ton. Quick note before we dive in, I didn't even know who this pirate software guy was until he started popping up in my feed. More like flooding. From what I've seen though, he's got unpopular opinions and a bit of an ego. But hey, what programmer doesn't? Now I don't share Thor's views on Stop Killing Games initiative. I think some oversight is fine, especially with games now hitting $90 a pop. I'd better own the damn game. But I can also see his point. From the sounds of it, he just doesn't want the government to get involved in games. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this guy could really use a PR agent. We're allowed to disagree. Anyways, my main issue with Thor is that he needs to either finish the game or reimburse his funders, and in any case, he owes his backers at least better communication. And if they're fine, then I'm fine. It's really between them and Thor. This video isn't about defending him, it's about giving an honest, professional code review and sharing real insight into the industry. And yes, I'll try not to roast coding Jesus, even though I really don't like the guy. I'll still be as fair to him as well, giving him some benefit of the doubt. But not on the lighting code. That was a dirty and shameful trick. If I am guilty of anything, it's disliking this coding Jesus guy. Not because of Thor, but because he appears to be teaching his students bad practices while also humiliating them. My own students asked if code reviews are really supposed to be that scary. It tells you in itself how bad this example is. Real reviews are supposed to be respectful. Workplaces don't tolerate brilliant jerks because they kill morale. By normalizing this behavior, he is promoting bullying, which just makes the industry and the community more toxic. Look, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I'm not here to grift. If I was, I'd just chase the algorithm rather than fight against it. And push out an easy 5 to 6 digit views. Sure seems to be what everyone else is doing after all. But the facts matter to me, and that's why we do our research. I'd rather put out the truth than to push a fake narrative, something coding Jesus clearly doesn't care about. Worse, his misinformation is already spreading. His fanboys are becoming more and more toxic, creating bullies in our community, and that's exactly why this needs to be called out. As proof of this toxic behavior spreading, just look at any one of CJ's supporters bullying real GML devs in any discussion about this nonsense. You ever thought that defenses are repeating because they could be true? Well, don't worry, because we have proof in this video. To be clear, this review is meant to be fair and educational. I'm not here to add fuel to the pirate software drama. I only want to clear up some misinformation and misunderstandings and give Thor's code a proper code review. Alright, so let's tackle this, and let's clear up a big misconception about Thor that keeps coming up as well, for those of you who don't know. People were upset because he supposedly claimed 20 years of game dev and hacker experience. And so people assumed he was this big coding guy, but he ended up being called a fraud. That sounds misleading, and trust me, I can understand how someone might feel betrayed. I personally don't like being lied to either. This is why I'm exposing all of CJ's lies. But the truth is, anyone on a game dev team counts as a game developer. Artists, composers, designers, QA testers, managers, etc. You don't need to code to be a game dev. Even the janitor on some teams, as long as they contribute, at least in indie teams. AAA companies do actually tend to be a little more strict on this, but it still remains true if you're on the team, you're at least a game dev. Because you are developing the game, or helping. Another point others have brought up repeatedly, Thor worked at Blizzard in QA. Yes, but QA isn't coding. It's finding bugs and reporting crashes, basically the messenger of bad news. It's kind of like...
Hey, you know that bug that you thought you fixed last week? Yeah, it's kind of back again.
Fuck!
Hi! Did you get around to fixing those bugs yet?
Just make a ticket.
You haven't even started? Ooh, that's not good. I found like 10 more.
Get out. Yeah, That's the dynamic. They're professional game testers, and you don't usually need much experience. QA stands for quality assurance. Personally, going after someone's career and work history is a low blow. And then to misrepresent it again, well, honestly at this point I wouldn't trust Coding Jesus or anything he says. If that wasn't beyond obvious, he's proven to be a liar repeatedly. Now the part we are all here for, at least I hope. The code and some context, and why it matters. The code being reviewed is from 2018. The earliest mention of Heartbound from our research and the research of a fan is 2016. The Kickstarter started in 2017, and the code CJ reviewed is from 2018. So realistically, Thor only had about a year or two of GameMaker experience. And no, LSL does not count as game programming experience. It's a simplified scripting language specifically for Second Life, with no classes or structs, and no game dev concepts are learned from LSL. But instead, he spun it negatively and even manipulated parts of the code to make it look worse than it actually was. That's dishonest. And when I discovered this fact as well, it actually makes Jesus' so-called code review even more damning. Calling Thor an intern or below intern level, well yes, because you were indeed looking at beginner code at the time. Again, everyone writes bad code, even professionals, especially under a deadline. Now, Coding Jesus and the Detractors will argue that all coding languages share fundamentals. True. But not all have the same tools or concepts. GameMaker is procedural, like C, has no classes and no type safety. And again, this is something he should have known had he actually consulted the documentation and studied for the test. To be fair, this is probably something he perhaps could not have known initially. But he was told this several times, and so was the public, who shamed anyone who defended this fact. Structs didn't exist until 2020 in GameMaker. Most of CJ's suggestions were either impossible in 2018 or just nitpicking, which could be a big reason for the disconnect between CJ and Thor, or for anyone who actually is in the know. The link to this document will be provided below, and because I know some of you can't read more than a paragraph, Control F exists as well. Obtaining this proof was a huge pain in the ass for an engine version that is no longer publicly supported. None of their license keys work anymore because their servers are offline, and their manual page has no history before 2023 because they switched domains. I would have shown you a live demo in the exact version, but yeah, that was an annoying rabbit hole. Stop killing game engines. So, maybe next time we should believe the experts or the people that have actually used GameMaker in the past, screaming their heads off that you're all being misled. Moving on. Okay, now that that is out of the way, here is the game plan. I'll first break down what CJ got wrong, explain a couple of better suggestions for 2018, then cover what he got right, and finally grade the review. And for those of you wondering why the hell you should care about code in 2018, well, the concepts that will be shared are actually transferable to the present day. See, game developers are actually moving away from object-oriented programming concepts, and they're moving more towards ECS, which GameMaker is also a lot more closer to. So everything that you will learn here can be used today. Is this code review going to be indicative of Thor's skill level today? No. This code was written in 2018, and even if the code looks the same today, it just means he's never felt the need to fix it, not that he doesn't know how to fix it. It is possible that he never learned from these mistakes because to him they never caused him any issues. If that is the case, to be honest, it's fine. Clean code is a myth. There is always something to clean. So I will be suggesting possible fixes for the Thor of the past and to anyone else who may have these issues in their code today. Right away, CJ's review starts with bad advice, showing his inexperience. He's suggesting to use constant variables for every parameter in the particle system, overlooking that there are multiple functions and parameters here. This would turn 5 lines into about 35, and it's pitched here as intern-level concept. But it's more readable now, supposedly. Thumbs up if you disagree. There are times and places to apply this practice, but it is not here. Since these are engine-defined factory builder functions, no reasonable game programmer would follow this practice, as parameters themselves are already variables, and constants can't be reset or reused. Instead, consider wrapping the particle functions into a reusable, strategically parameterized function for color, scale, lifetime, etc. This will create a flexible, reusable particle system template. These are not magic numbers simply because you don't know the engine. The argument for not needing to use IntelliSense or parameter hints is one I'd expect from some guy coding in a notepad. You should always know, at the bare minimum, the engine that you're working in, before touching the code. Anyone who knows GML would know what this code does. CJ then goes on to criticize how Thor turns off his alarm clock in the morning. This is an engine-defined array, you can't rename it, but you can name the alarm events with this description tag here. The names then show up in this event viewer here. You could, if you must, use an enum in the array indices, but the IDE does a good enough job of telling you what these alarms are if you name them. Then CJ incorrectly uses the term spaghetti code. Spaghetti code is not all code that you do not understand. Spaghetti code has a specific definition for code that jumps all around the program, seemingly randomly. These alarms end at their alarm events. In another video, CJ incorrectly claims Thor does not know how to use loops. In other areas of the code, Thor does use loops. And if you know anything about compilers, which CJ clearly does not appear to, you'd know that a simple loop like this would just get unrolled anyways, becoming the exact same code. It's also less flexible, so I would honestly prefer the unrolled version myself. One bad practice GameMaker might encourage, which you probably shouldn't do in the real world. The with statement allows you to execute an entire block of code in another object's scope. This is bad because now you have code belonging to another object in another object's code. But it is a feature of the engine that you can use if you choose to. Just be mindful that it can make code very confusing to debug in the future. Personally, I would avoid using it as much as you can, because it breaks both single responsibility and open and closed principles, and you can get very confusing very quickly if it's overused. It's not very well known in GameMaker, but you can actually create functions outside of a script and inside of an object's create event. This allows you to create a public interface to interact with other objects without using the with statement. CJ then incorrectly states that Thor has no understanding of types. In a loosely typed language like GML, variables can switch types by reassigning the values, just like in JavaScript. So all of his questions should be directed towards the language that he didn't read the manual for. All of this code on screen now is functionally equivalent in GameMaker and in most languages. CJ also incorrectly states that Booleans are integers under the hood, showing his own misunderstanding of types. Booleans are bytes under the hood in most languages, not integers. In GameMaker, the constants true and false have the values of 1 and 0, and they are 64-bit floating point values, which are called reals. Basically, all numbers in GML are doubles. And this hurts me and all low-level systems engineers. The syntax of 1s and 0s for true and false actually comes from C-based languages, of which GML is loosely based on. So there is no misunderstanding of types here, it's just reference. Next, CJ criticizes the global array, clearly not understanding its use fully, and does so rather rudely. The first thing I noticed when looking at this file myself is that it's simply for documentation purposes. Thor uses a for loop above everything else to initialize the array to 0. This means that Thor could very likely just remove all the array code, or replace it with comments, and it'd still function the exact same. This global array is actually common to RPGs. Every RPG has a single source of truth to store story progress flags. It could be an array, or it could be a hash map. Not going to lie, in GML, DS maps were kind of ugly to work with. One suggestion every software engineer out there is screaming for, even without context, is enums, and I agree, enums would make this array functionally equivalent to a hash map. CJ's suggestion, however, was to use a nested structure, and we already know structures don't exist here, but would you actually use a structure in this situation if you could? No, that has the same or worse issues because now you have thousands of named key values to remember, and every dot accessor is another memory read operation. An enum into the indices of the array is the most optimal, because it just requires one read operation in constant time. So, Thor is using the most optimal structure here. Now why isn't Thor using enums? Well, I have a theory. It's because he's streaming to people who may want to play the game someday, and named enums might be quite the spoiler in the story if you had flags such as "has favorite character died." We can see that Thor does indeed know how to use enums, as they do appear in other parts of the code. So I believe I might be right on this. Whatever the reason is, it's for secrecy. And no, it won't slow down development. This CJ guy acts like split views don't exist and he has limited memory. You'll likely only be working on one of these flags at a time. Another suggestion, if you have code like this where you do access the raw array in hundreds of places, you can wrap it into a getter and setter function. This has the benefit of routing all flag-based code to one single location, where you can then update the underlying functionality of in the future and even add sanitization checks. You could even have several different types of flag functions, like character flags that set bit masks, for example. I will show you how you can easily make this change with pretty much any code editor out there using find and replace with a regular expression. The first thing you should always do before refactoring anything in your project is to make sure you have a backup. Now you see we have an enum with some values we would like to replace into the array. Let's go down here and copy this index of 6 because that's what we want to replace. Go into your editor's find and replace feature, paste the value and type in your flag. Press this button or find and replace all. Now everywhere in the project you have this new flag in the array index. Now let's work on the setter. Wherever we set a value, it's going to look something like this. So let's grab that and we'll Control H. And we'll make our first capture group. The dot means any character and the asterisk means as many as we can get. Let's make the second capture group. That's the same. So now let's replace it with our setter function. With a $sign of 1 and $sign of 2. And then press this button to replace all. Now everywhere in the project, wherever we set the value, it should use this wrapper function. And you see it's kept the value. Now let's work on our getter. Everywhere we're reading from the array should look something like this. So let's Control H again, and we'll change this value. Same thing, and this time we're going to use a digit. We're going to change this to our getter. And then replace the string. Everywhere in the project has been replaced. Honestly, at this point I thought this CJ guy was just fucking with me, because this entire time he's been preaching about nested structures and pushing them where they don't belong. The one time he comes across some actual data where a structure could be used, he only suggests an enum. Unfortunately, this is GameMaker in 2018, and structures don't work. So another thing you can do is a naming convention. You can name your assets in a way that you can access them through code. For instance, you could put the index in the asset name. And if you look down there, Thor actually knows about this technique. At one point, CJ suggests to use a file system using a YAML or XML file. But he failed to realize that he was talking about the live game state. To read live game state from a file is ludicrous. The game state could be read every frame. That's 60 times per second. Your hard disk and your customer's hard disks will hate you if you try this. And he states that you learn this on the first day of your new job. Actually, no, the first week or so of your new job is called onboarding. You're not touching the code. You're learning about the structure of the project. If you did try this on the first day of the new job, you'd be fired. So how did CJ do on his own test? Well, as you can see here, he didn't offer any useful feedback. Was very rude and hostile for the code review. He mostly complained about the engine and applied the incorrect solutions to the wrong situations. And then he taught them as if they were gospel truths or intern level. Between not fully understanding the language he was reviewing, not studying for the test by reading the manual at least, and not being a game developer himself, he made several mistakes, and I've even found issues with his C++ examples that could have been done better in C++. I have doubts that he's actually ever worked on a production team himself. from everything that I've seen in this code review, and if he has not worked long on the same team with that kind of attitude. Overall, the one useful thing that CJ said that I'll give him credit for was using enums, but he missed the one crucial chance he had for easy points, and he basically flunked the test. Overall, in my expert opinion, I would say that after looking at the code myself, the problems that have been stated in it were vastly over-exaggerated by people who have no idea what GameMaker is. Or they are not game developers themselves, and they are making several assumptions about GML based on other languages or unknown limitations of the time. GameMaker is simple. To make a new feature, you just make a new object and put a few scripts on it. There is no structure to be locked into, like in other languages. I will note that I have seen much worse code in production projects, where there was actual spaghetti code in order to get the project released on time. And that clean code is not the priority under such situations. The client doesn't care if your code is pretty, but they will care if the project doesn't meet the deadline. Now, there are still more suggestions and refactoring tips I do have to go along with this code base, which we will be doing a deeper dive on in a future video in order to keep this one from getting too long. But that video will likely be more focused on the code instead of CJ's review. If you enjoyed watching or learned anything, be sure to stay tuned for the next video.
Judge me by my fruit, judge me by my fruits, not by what I say, but what I do. I went for a pirate to steal some gold, and I broke some code and my schemes unfold. But no one knows I had everyone fooled till you peeked at the code. Gold in my eyes, lies in my path, code in my hands, but I chose the raft. Slipped through the shadows wearing a bit mask. I fooled the world, but I knew it wouldn't last. You went for the gold, got cursed instead. Code went red, alarms in my head. Talk is cheap, receipts are the proof. It's not what you say, it's the trail of truth.
Pretending like you're some code say.
You had everyone fooled with your fake code review, asking them what's 42. Preaching type safety and made a fool. If only you'd read the manual too. Nested structures is all you do. Screaming magic numbers that bother you. Serialized files every frame too. That's not something you should ever do.
Objectively better?
Don't be a fool. Judge me by my fruits, judge me by my fruits, not by my words, but by what I do.
Not a hero, not a saint, just a sinner with a mask of shame. You thought you could take it all, but the code always tells when it smells. Your fruit don't lie, no words to fake. Your past is written in the lines you break. Karma works fast, she's on your path. You can't run from judgment's wrath.